Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a double agent who plotted to assassinate Adolf Hitler in the Wolfslair fortress. When the plot failed, Hitler made sure he was executed in the final days before the German surrender. Today, he is hailed as a 20th century martyr, and you can find his statue among the sculptures of the 10 modern martyrs above the west entrance of Westminster Abbey in London. But who was he really? And why is his name widely known? And why is he a martyr? To find out, we need to go back to a time in history when there was a huge upheaval in our world. A World War I German corporal from Austria had a vision for Germany and the world. His name, Adolf Hitler. The German nation was despondent after the defeat of World War I, the end of the monarchy, and the subsequent economic collapse. The charismatic Hitler offered a new government to replace the monarchy and appeared to be the nation's answer to their prayers. Now, the rise of the Third Reich brought the aristocratic and highly educated Christian pacifist Dietrich Bonhoeffer into a collision course with Hitler and the Nazi regime. Bonhoeffer struggled with the moral dilemma, his religious views, and the courage to do something about the persecution of the Jews. In order to avoid compulsory military service, Bonhoeffer's brother-in-law helped him get a job with the German Secret Service, the Abwehr. Soon he became a double agent and was involved in foreign travel, secret meetings and resistance plans, and was soon part of a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Hitler viewed Bonhoeffer as a threat. He was banned from Berlin, forbidden to write, speak or publish. He tried to sabotage the Nazi war effort and smuggle German Jews to Switzerland. Bonhoeffer's personal mantra was, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." He was arrested for his work as a double agent and assisting Jews to escape from Germany. When the plot, Operation Valkyrie, failed, Bonhoeffer's connections with the other conspirators were uncovered and he was sentenced to death. He chose to face imprisonment and execution with courage and to be faithful to the principles of his beliefs in God. He advocated that Christianity should transform your life and your actions. A famous author wrote this: "The greatest want of the world is the want of men, men who will not be bought or sold, men who in their inmost souls are true and honest, men who do not fear to call sin by its right name, men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole, men who will stand for the right though the heavens fall." Today, Bonhoeffer is celebrated for his Christian ethics, and his theological writings are considered to be classics throughout the Christian world. His work is centered around the amazing grace that God offers each one of us. Let's read what the Bible says about grace in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me."
Good morning.
Morning. My name is Taylor Chadwick, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees of this congregation. Welcome to all of you. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Elkhart is a welcoming community encouraging religious freedom, nurturing individual spiritual and ethical growth, celebrating diversity, and promoting a just and sustainable world. If you would like to learn more about this fellowship, please look at our website at uufe.org and join us after the service for our coffee hour. For the listening enjoyment of all, we ask at this time to please turn off all cell phones. Also, if you need hearing support, please ask for help at the sound desk. All right, I've got some announcements today. First one is John's kind of unfortunate. Rich Hackle passed away in his sleep on April 3rd. Rich has been recovering from his stroke last August. His wife, Karen McKenna, would like to have a service to honor his memory in May. Meanwhile, condolence cards have been sent to Karen. Please refer to the care line for the address or our bulletin board by the restrooms. A memorial service for Kenley Inglefield will be held Saturday, June 1st at 1 p.m. A visitation and refreshments will be held afterwards. Later this month, we will have a clipboard on Ivy Island so that volunteers will help us have a meaningful service. More details will be forthcoming. If interested in being trained in CPR or first aid, please sign the whiteboard at the gathering place under Social Justice Committee. Steve Cripe or Pam Wycliffe will then answer any of your questions. This will involve a very reasonable cost, less than $25 per person on average, and could be done at UUFE or on-site at Elkhart General Hospital. Saturday, April 13th, Jim Scott is coming to UUFE to perform a musical show entitled The Year to Save the Earth. The show will start at 5:30 and advance tickets are $15. It's $20 up front, right? Jim performed several years ago at UUFE, and his music is primarily focused on the environmental and ecological issues. Advance tickets can be purchased from the homepage of our website, uufe.org, or see Ken Claiborne or Steve Cripe. County Road 9, Johnson Street, cleanup will be April 20th at 9 p.m. or 9 a.m., please. Organized by Steve Cripe. Sign-up sheets are on Ivy Island. A possible rain day would be April 27th. Don't forget, Mid-America Regional Assembly is in person and virtual, and this will be held April 19th through 20th at the First Unitarian Social Society of Madison, Wisconsin. Terry Mark, who is a Mid-American Region board member, and Annette Long and Pat Wycliffe will be attending. It would be great if more UFE members can join us. For more information, including how to register, go to uua.org/midamerica.
A couple other announcements. This being the first Sunday of the month, remember that we need to pick the chairs up afterwards. And in addition to that, we need a few bodies to help move a couple items from here to the gathering place for the concert this coming Saturday. So after we get the chairs moved, see Carl, and he'll be going around here. We just got to move some speakers and a couple other things so that if we can get some help with that, that would be appreciated. Also, the orders of service were printed before I could put in the names of Oksana, Susie Haitu for the flowers. They've been beautiful. We've shared them the last 2 Sundays. And Phyllis Hostetler provided the snacks this morning. We ring the gong 3 times. Once for those who came before us and made a place for us. And once for those who are here now. And once for those who will come after and build on the dream. Hear these words from Lee Kinby. This chalice is for the living, the changing, the becoming. This chalice is for losing the script of your life, the chapters about who you are in other people's stories. This chalice is for the lost GPSs that was supposed to show you how to get where they expected you to go. This chalice is for skipping the directions, coloring outside the lines, painting not by number, but by the silence, by wild abandon with a brush you made yourself. From light deep inside, startling, vivid, a new voice that already knows you. Finally, a true story. If you would join me now in reading the Unison Covenant as printed in the order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. The children can now be dismissed with Taylor. Hymn number 219 is new to you, but it's very simple, and Marva's going to play it all the way through for introduction. And if you stand, if willing and able to stand, let's please sing hymn number 219, Oh, Hear My People. The offering this morning will go to the sustainability fund of the congregation to support our work here and keep the building and the lights on. I've attached something to your order of service this morning. They're the lyrics to two of the hymns that Marva will be playing, one during the offering and one during the postlude. So just read those at your convenience, and that's what those are for. So please now give generously. Thank you. In Reverend Jimmy style, I'm going to start with a joke. Did you know Francis was not the first choice to become the new pope? Actually, it was a lesser-known man, Cardinal Hasenbacher. He'd been a man of God from an early age, a pacifist all his life. When World War II broke out, he was conscripted to fight in the service. And so he became a bomber pilot. A few months into the war, he was shot down, but survived, miraculously only losing an eye in the crash. He continued his work with the church after the war ended and started his mission work. Wanting to help the less fortunate, he made his way to Africa, eventually found his way to Zimbabwe. While there, he was called to duty when a terrible collapse of a local diamond mine occurred. After making the very dangerous journey into the mine, he began giving and the gravely injured their last rites. Suddenly, a second cave-in occurred, trapping the cardinal. Through the grace of God, he survived, though he barely escaped with his life, but losing a left arm. Decades later, a new pope was to be elected. Many in the College of Cardinals believed Cardinal Hasenbacher was the perfect man for the position. But sadly, many more believed that parishioners just could not get into a one-eyed, one-armed, flying papal people leader. All right, if this is all you remember from this morning, it's not Jimmy's fault. In 1964, I entered into 2 years of volunteer service with BBS, as was my response with my 1W draft status as a conscientious objector with the Selective Service of the United States government. Looking back, I made that decision as a 19-year-old kid, but I probably would make the same decision this year as an 80-year-old Unitarian Universalist. BVS, being administered by the Church of the Brethren, had many guidelines to follow as part of that faith community's outreach program. One of them was an extensive required reading list to be completed before participating in one's 2 years of service. My favorite book on that list was Dietrich Bonhoeffer's The Cost of Discipleship. Growing up in the church and holding many leadership roles in both the youth group and the overall administration of the congregation, I was encouraged at a young age to enter the ministry. However, I never felt such a calling. Instead, I felt tremendous pressure to something which I really wasn't comfortable. After reading The Cost of Discipleship, I rationalized that I just wasn't worthy to be an ordained minister, but I could commit to be the best I could be as a member of my faith community. What is written in this book is impossible for most humans to accomplish. But what a tremendous influence and inspiration to the reader. The title is a direct giveaway of the many challenges presented within its pages. When I recently ran across today's sermon by Reverend Dennis McCarty, I felt compelled to ask the Worship and Arts Committee if I could present it as a service to UUFE. I picked April 7th because in 2 days, April 9th, 2024, will be the 79th anniversary of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's death at the hands of the Nazis after spending 2 years in the Flossenburg concentration camp. Reverend McCarty is a pastor emeritus from the Columbus, Indiana UU congregation. He is an avowed atheist. How Dietrich Bonhoeffer influenced and inspired Reverend McCarty as an atheist is what inspired me to share this message. As I shared today's message from Reverend McCarty, they are exactly what he has written, but I made one exception with a reference to Rich Meyer, and those will be my words. Also, I really appreciate Reverend Jimmy for lifting up 3 Unitarian Universalists in last week's sermon who gave the ultimate sacrifice of their lives. Francis David died in prison, and Michael Servetus was burned at the stake simply for having differing religious beliefs than the theological norm for their day. And James Reeb the UU pastor who participated in the Selma Civil Rights March demonstrations, was beaten and died of his injuries in 1965. And unfortunately, that has never been solved because his accusers were acquitted. Faith, Hope, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This service was originally presented on December 10th, 2017 by Reverend Dennis McCarty. I'm an atheist now, but I grew up in a pretty traditional Christian household. Our family would sometimes hold Bible readings at the kitchen table of an evening, and those moments of religious delving to me went deeper than the mere words on the page. We were acknowledging that there were much more to the cosmos than just what I saw, what I know, or what I wanted. One of my parents' favorite passages was the Sermon on the Mount from the Gospel of St. Matthew. Scholars agree the Gospel was written down about 50 years after Jesus' death, that the person who wrote it probably never met Jesus. But the Sermon on the Mount probably did express the ethical center of what Jesus actually taught. It's a teaching which goes against the grain of human nature. There's a shadow side to us, and the Beatitudes challenge that shadow. It takes insight and self-discipline to step beyond group instinct and self-interest, to reflect the ethic of divine love that Jesus actually taught. In my view, watching so many evangelical Christians line up behind Donald Trump and Roy Moore, frankly, we see how easy it is to call oneself Christian while totally abandoning Christian ethics. Just my opinion, but it is undeniably easy to rationalize our own fear, greed, and anger by claiming they all come from God's will. The most stirring part of the Sermon on the Mount is the passage known as the Beatitudes, both as poetry and as a clarion call to a higher ethics. The Beatitudes are some of the most powerful writings in the Bible. To me, whether an atheist or theist, the Beatitudes are just about all the theology one only needs. But in the 5 centuries after Jesus' crucifixion, Christian ethics took a back seat to politics. As the church became the religious arm of the Roman Empire, church fathers came to emphasize authority. As St. Augustine put it, original sin made humans so corrupt we were not capable of anything good on our own. Therefore, the highest human good had to be obedience to the church-state combine, which is precisely why he developed the doctrine of original sin in the first place, to keep the masses in line. 1,000 years later, Martin Luther still worried more about obedience to authority than about the challenge of the Beatitudes. A much later German theologian, Ernest Tresch, hinted that the American Revolution would never have happened had our founders been German Lutherans instead of English Calvinists. As Germany became a modern nation in the 1800s, Germans became fiercely nationalistic. They included Germany's churches. As Prussia became the German Empire, German churches strongly supported the German militarism. By the First World War, every German soldier's belt buckle was inscribed with the words, Gott mit uns, God with us. When Germany lost the war, the government collapsed and the church lost a lot of its prestige, as well as for some, German Lutheranism became all but irrelevant. That was the world Dietrich Bonhoeffer grew up in. Despite the Lutheran Church's missteps, though, partly because of them, he decided to study for the ministry. His doctoral dissertation called for the reformation for a Reformed Lutheran church in tune with the real needs of the people. It was hailed as a masterpiece. He believed that when governments or churches claim God is on their side, that's a serious form of blasphemy, because it reduces God to a mere tribal deity. He wrote that even when communities split, Christ is not divided. He crossed the Atlantic Ocean to attend Union Theological Seminary in New York. There, his interest for justice and activism was honed by some of the same professors who later taught Martin Luther King. He also attended the New York's African American Abyssinian Baptist Church, where he also developed a taste for gospel music. To most German Lutheran clergy, though, that what Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount was just too difficult for humans. The Beatitudes only served to show how hopelessly corrupt and in need of salvation we were. But at Union Theological Seminary, the Beatitudes became Bonhoeffer's favorite passage, the guide for how a faithful Christian should behave. To put it in the words of the Unitarian Universalist Christian, theologian James Luther Adams, Bonhoeffer sought a religion of Jesus, not just a religion about Jesus. More than worshiping Jesus' image or name, Bonhoeffer wanted to live in a way that brought Jesus back to life, though through just and courageous actions. That was difficult in 1930s Germany. Economic unrest destabilized the Weimar Republic. When it fell, Adolf Hitler swept into power. Hitler talked a lot about God. He said God had a great plan for Germany. Under the helm of a strong leader, blessed and ordained by God, namely Hitler himself. Bonhoeffer's religion set him on a collision course with Hitler's Nazis, and it didn't take long. 2 days after Hitler's inauguration as chancellor, Bonhoeffer delivered a radio message in which he called Hitler a misleader rather than a leader because the Führer had set himself up as an idol. Nazi officials cut the broadcast off before Bonhoeffer could even finish. But he had made his point. He had also gotten his name into government folders throughout all of Germany. As an example of his real attitude toward religion, Hitler once told a staff member, referring to a certain class of people, "You can do anything you want with them. They will submit. They are insignificant little people, submissive as dogs, and they sweat with embarrassment when you talk with them." No, he's not talking about the Jews. Hitler was talking about the Protestant clergy. Sadly, most of Germany's ministers proved Hitler correct by siding with Hitler rather than Bonhoeffer. Hitler set up a United Reich Church. Pastors were required to swear a personal oath to Hitler. The swastika joined the cross on the altar, and they adopted what was called the Aryan paragraph into church creeds. The Aryan paragraph denied church membership to anyone of Jewish ancestry or who was married to a Jew. A few clergy, including Bonhoeffer, did rebel. They formed what they called the confessing church, and he prepared a pamphlet entitled "The Church and the Jewish Question." It shows Bonhoeffer as a product of his time. He did agree that Christianity had replaced Judaism as God's chosen people, and he did believe Jews would ultimately be reconciled with Jesus as the Messiah. But he also saw the persecution of Jews as abject evil, comparing it with the treatment of blacks in the United States. Seeing Germany's moral collapse as an affront to God, he wrote it was every Christian's duty to fight government injustice. It was a Christian's duty to help the victims of state injustice, whether they were Christian or not. It was a Christian duty not only to keep the victims who had fallen under the wheel of justice, but to cast oneself into the spoke of the wheel itself. To Bonhoeffer, it was a Christian duty to actively resist the Nazi government's injustice on every turn. As an atheist, this makes me want to ask my fellow atheists what our atheism means. It strikes me that atheism must also lead us to real practice in the real world, no less than Bonhoeffer's Christianity. Otherwise, what value does proclaimed reason and skepticism hold? Remember when Rich Meyer challenged the pacifists to become active and get into the line of fire in the battle zone, giving substance rather than just lip service to pacifism. Same idea. Those were my words. Of course, the Nazis were not about to put up with that kind of talk. They closed down the seminary where Bonhoeffer taught and banned him from teaching at all. So he taught illegally in secret. In 1938, he began to describe church and synagogue as being equal in the eyes of God. On hearing that, the Gestapo banned him from any public speaking at all. Friends urged him to return to the United States for his own safety, and he did go. But he didn't stay long. He was sure Hitler would fall. And if he didn't stay with Germany during her time of suffering, he believed he would have no right to a voice once Hitler was gone. He returned just as Germany was invading Poland, touching off the Second World War. Incredibly, his overseas connections helped him to obtain a position with the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence agency. By that time, top Abwehr officials had turned against the Nazis. With top-level security clearances, they knew about atrocities the public hadn't yet suspected. That disgusted many of them, so Bonhoeffer actually fit in well. Meanwhile, Bonhoeffer was actually also falling in love with a vivacious young woman named Maria von Wiedemeyer. They grew close, then decided that as soon as the war was over, they would marry. Till then, Bonhoeffer would use his overseas connections to ask foreign governments to help overthrow Hitler. This caused a real struggle with his conscience. As a Christian, wasn't he supposed to be a man of peace? How could he be sure he was doing the right thing? He finally decided that as a mortal human, he would never have the comfort of certainty. He could only act on his conscience to actively oppose evil. Hitler had to go. Unfortunately, by 1943, England and the United States had already decided that Germany had to be totally defeated. The plot to eliminate Hitler would leave the German army intact, so Allied officials listened politely to the plotters, but gave them no help. Bonhoeffer also joined a group smuggling Jews out of Germany, giving them forged documents and money for transportation. But the Gestapo was watching. They traced the money back to Bonhoeffer, and in April 1943, they arrested him and several other people. He was subjected to brutal interrogation and torture that went on for months. It was Bonhoeffer's religious faith that gave him the strength and discipline to resist. Not only did he reveal nothing, he found ways to continue his religious writing, smuggling letters to family and friends. After 3 months, his jailers allowed his sweetheart, Maria, to visit him. They didn't tell him she was coming until she was already at the prison. The guards brought him into a drawing room where there was a small couch. They led him in a door on the left and Maria on the other door at the opposite side. And the guards told him to sit on the couch, but they could not touch, and they only could not whisper. They had to speak so that the guards could hear what they were saying. After half an hour, the guards told them to visit. The visit was over. They led Bonhoeffer back the way he came, and the other guard escorted Maria back to where she came in. Just as she reached the door, she wheeled back, broke free, and ran from the guard, and before anyone could stop her, ran to Bonhoeffer. threw her arms around him, and told him how deeply she loved him. Then the guards pulled him apart and took him back to the cell. They never saw one another again. Through the winter of 1944 and 45, Allied armies advanced toward Berlin from all directions. Everyone knew Germany had lost the war, but Hitler's generals were more terrified of Hitler than the Gestapo than the Allies, so they fought on. In Poland in the east and Denmark in the west, Allied forces began to discover the concentration camps, shocking the world with the horrors they revealed. In April 1945, with Allied victory just weeks away, Nazi leaders issued orders to speed up the executions of political prisoners. On April 9th, Dietrich Bonhoeffer and several others were taken outside, stripped naked, and hanged. His last words were, "This is the end, but for me, the beginning of life." Some have said that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a failure, and in some ways I suppose that's so. He and his cohorts were unable to stop Hitler. He couldn't even convince many of his fellow clergy that Hitler's injustice was a serious problem. Then again, even if he did fail, at least he stood against the overwhelming flood of evil so many others simply allowed to wash freely over his country. You could even argue that Bonhoeffer failed exactly the same way Jesus himself failed. The Beatitudes are arguably the most brilliant piece of ethical theology ever produced. But few people, even few Christians, really try to put them into practice. Proclaiming to Jesus to be God is infinitely easier than living with the love and self-discipline Jesus asked us to practice. With this, I think, which is, I think, exactly why Christian fundamentalism is so much more popular than more thoughtful strains of Christianity. It's easy to worship Jesus and call him God. It's hard to live the way he taught people to live. At the same time, Bonhoeffer's life also illustrated how serious a mistake we Unitarian Universalists make when we try to paint a broad swoop and a broadcloth brush about all Christians. I feel that I need to mention that. It is the fate of all human beings to live through difficult times when we are challenged to stand for ethics in the face of evil. Nor is it given to us to control the outcomes of the great stories of our times, or even to know the final outcomes of those stories. But atheist though I am, I agree with Dietrich Bonhoeffer. If we are to be fully human, then it is our call in the big picture to struggle against the shadows that close in around us. He saw the ancient Christian worship tradition as bankrupt. His religious faith called him to see God in every person, to strive toward the best that's in human nature, and to act against human injustice, even in the peril of his very life. That was his religion, and I would like to be able to claim it as my religion as well. I hear a lot of talk about how different atheism is from theism, and how mutually irreconcilable they are. But here's a thought. Atheism and theism are separate when they're both being weak. They are not separate when they're both being strong. In other words, by itself, the most fervent belief of the most skeptical non-belief, devout Christianity or skeptical atheism by themselves are just self-indulgent wind. What you do or don't believe doesn't mean a thing until it starts to change your life and the lives of those around you. When that happens, when our ideals call us to commitment, join paths with the oppressed and the miserable, that supposed theological separation vanishes into mist. Christianity and atheism become one and the same. In that way, times of the greatest challenge also become times of the greatest hope. Dietrich Bonhoeffer's Christian courage gave him the strength to live his ideals in the face of intimidation, torture, and in the end, death. It carried him through suffering with the humility and good humor even when all practical hope was lost. I have to say, a religious faith that does that is the real thing. Whether we agree with the metaphysical details or not, I pray in the self-directed way that an atheist can pray, that if I ever face the challenges Dietrich Bonhoeffer faced, my ethical faith will do as much for me as his did for him. Thus ends Reverend McCarty's words. I would suggest a challenging question to myself and to those of us in this room today in response to today's message. Who will be the Dietrich Bonhoeffers of today, standing up against exactly the same evil forces that existed in 1940s Germany and the parallels we are actually experiencing in 2024 America? Okay, we can sing again. Stand if you're willing and able, and let's sing together number 410, Surprised by Joy. Hear these words of benediction from Reverend McCarty. In the spirit of love, harmony, and remembrance, we stand too often divided, too often set apart from one another in needless ways. We seek to be compassionate, but our vision may be clouded and distracted. We too often go forward day by day and look without seeing. As you leave this place this morning, blessings to yourselves and to those around you this week as you draw strength from those you have inspired. And may you be an inspiration to others. May it be so. You may be seated. Our music this morning illustrated many factors that influenced Dietrich Bonhoeffer's life. From faith foundation building grace to living by loving kindness, by uniting the human family through human common cause, the joyful experience of living by faith, hope, and love, to celebrating the lives here on earth so joyfully that it causes the trees to clap their hands, to the world of classical music, and to the mundane things of all of life, all the way to the fishes of the deep blue sea. Experience now with Marva as she sends us out musically in the spirit of joy and celebration.